Welcome back, everyone. In Nigeria, the cost of governance over the years has been very high and alarming, and therefore unsustainable as recurrent expenditure continues to significantly exceed capital expenditure. This problem has continued to generate public concern and national discourse because of the negative implication on investment, industrial expansion, infrastructural development, and growth of the real sectors of the economy. So tonight we're focusing our attention on cost cutting amid revenue decline. And joining me to do justice to this very important conversation are two gentlemen. Tunde Adekule is a UK-based oil and gas professional. He joins us via Zoom. And Kayode Oyedeji, an economist, is right here with me in the studio. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very
Mr. Oyedeji, it's so good to see you again. Mr. Adekule, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. So let me start this conversation from the studio. Mr. Oyedeji, slow revenue growth has contributed to Nigeria's growing budget deficit. On one hand, the government's earned revenue has also failed to meet its expected targets. And in addition to that, we have inflation eroding the value of earned revenues. And in the face of all of this, there is a necessity to cut costs. How do we bring these two realities together?
Well, we've had a lot of challenges at managing the economy and making sure that people get value for every kobo spent by government. But the more we have tried in the past, the less results we got as a country. So the more you try, the less the results you get. That's been the trend at federal, state, and local governments. The essence of government is to make sure that people get basic necessities of life. People get opportunities to do whatever they decide to do, be productive, and good living, and all sorts. And that can only be guaranteed when every kobo spent delivers maximum value for the greater majority of the people. So government has a responsibility to build roads, facilitate provision of basic necessities of life. But you can only do that when you have a budget that generates, that derives, it is derived from the people. People are able to make contributions. Their needs reflect in the budget. And that budget runs to provide services, not to maintain offices per se, but to make sure that people get value for every kobo spent. In Nigeria, for instance, we've had at the point we have about 75% of the budget dedicated to recurrent expenditure, and only 25%. The dilemma of this is that even the 25%, I'm talking about the past, not the current budget, is that out of that 25%, a lot still goes into corruption, into inflated budgets, into all kinds of things that would not impact positively on the lives of people. The current budget has about 10 trillion naira out of the 27 trillion naira for budget for capital expenditure. So we hope that will change slightly. But that's on the face value. There's more to it. The problem which we have in Nigeria is that government is self-seeking instead of seeking the interest of the people, not the federal government alone. So budget is created to first take care of people in government. Who are the people in government? We're talking about the civil service that creates this bureaucracy. Then we are talking about the political system that monitors the governance at the 3 tiers of government and the different levels of government. So we discovered, or it has been the trend, that money that should go into developing the economy, helping an average Nigerian, the citizens to develop themselves, we spend much of that on taking care of government itself, then awarding bogus contracts that have very little link, very little impact on the lives of the people. So there is need for a restructuring of the budget, a restructuring of our public finance. All kinds of reforms must come in. We must begin to look at every kobo spent. Does it serve the purpose of maintaining an office? Or does that kobo that will be spent this year, for instance, will it serve the welfare, will it lead to improvement in the welfare of the people? So we have a lot of agencies created. We have a lot of overlapping agencies, A, B, C, doing virtually the same thing. We have 3 agencies that can be combined together, operate under a roof, operate under a small structure, and still provide the same service. I'll give you an instance. In the Ministry of Education, for instance, we have about 3 agencies regulating and monitoring tertiary education in Nigeria. We have the Nigerian University Commission, you have NAPTEC, you have one for Polytechnic and co. Why can't you come together, put everything under a tertiary education board, and you have a division for each of them? Each of these agencies have huge overheads. They have a DG, they have a chairman, they have a board. These people suck the bulk of the money allocated to them. And these people also come together to look at how to make money from other dubious means, like what we've seen recently. So instead of having 3, 4 agencies doing almost the same thing, each of the DG will have one SUV big enough to cater for the entire agency. You have to look at it. That's from the top down to the bottom. You have an average worker somewhere having an SUV as official car, and the salary is just 12 million per annum or 6 million per annum, but the car you've given to him to do his work is over 20 million, 60 million, 40 million, as the case may be. What does he use the car for? To take care of himself? So we need to now look at the budgets one by one. Each budget aids, what purpose do they serve? Look at every agency, what purpose do they serve? Then we begin to look at how to match them. Then we begin to look at our contract system, the process of awarding contracts, how much it's done, how it is done, and are we really getting value for them? If you've been getting value for them, we'll have the kind of gap we have in terms of what we have, infrastructure we have, and the infrastructure we need in terms of quality of life of the people. So we have a lot of work to do. And thankfully, we have what we call the Orosoye Committee report. So this has been an ongoing issue for a long time. For over, I think, for about 20 years or thereabouts, since 1999. Orosoye Committee came up with a lot of policies, reduce the number of ministries, reduce the number of agencies and parastatals, then reduce the workforce, the bureaucracy. We keep having more and more political patronage. The National Assembly started as a small unit, but the National Assembly today is so big, so vast. You have a bureaucracy that is taking care of you, drinking water for lawmakers. You have every lawmaker having tens of it. You can hardly say what those people are doing. Then you begin to wonder why the civil service itself cannot even do anything again. It's bloated, over bloated. The chunk of government money is going into maintaining the interest of individuals rather than providing services for cross-wide of the Nigerian citizen.
All right, Mr. Yadeji, we'll also come back to the issue of restructuring our public finance. But let me bring Mr. Adekunle into this conversation. Nigeria is one of the countries in the world practicing presidential system of government. Is huge cost of governance synonymous to the presidential system of governance, or is Nigeria special?
Very good question. The system is as expensive as we want it, right? Let me give an example. In the United Kingdom, so to say, we have just 117 special advisors across board, from the PM to the secretaries of state and what have you. Just 117 special advisors. In Nigeria, how many do we have? The ministers have minimum of 10. Some have more. The presidency has more than 30. The last time I stopped counting around when he had appointed over 30. I stopped counting. I've lost count. United States have less than that. So it all depends on how you want it to be how you want to run your government. You want it to be efficient and lean and efficient, then you cut down. Now, the guest in the studio pointed out so many crucial things. Yes, the president did something yesterday by cutting his travel expenses, which is a very, very good step in the right direction, but he could still go a step further, even on that travel expenses. I would say, looking at the travel costs, say in terms of the allowances, internationally, as a yardstick, then I think it's 900. Some levels of officers get $900 a night, and I can tell you for free, no government official and traveling allowance in the United Kingdom and United States for traveling. What they give them is just hotel accommodation, and they stipulated the standard hotel that they have to stay in. Nobody stays in a 5-star hotel. Nobody stays in a 10-star hotel. Or what? No, they don't. At the expense of the government. They pay for the government takes care of the accommodation and feeding, just a breakfast. In Nigeria, a 3-course meal. It's if I go a little bit a step further too, in terms of cutting on the aids. The gentleman said something that there's duplication. Yes, there's duplication of function across board in terms of the aid. You have a special assistant for media. You have special assistant for communication. You have special assistant for digital, what have you. Too many doing the same thing. Now, apart from that, some time ago, there was an outcry on vehicle purchase of vehicle. And a lot of people have talked about it on that issue. Now, in terms of let's look at the government now. Let's forget about for now. I wouldn't want to talk about the senators or the House of Assembly. In terms of transportation, say official vehicles for the ministers, each minister has nothing less than 3 vehicles. We have the pilot vehicle, we have the backup vehicle, and the minister's vehicle. And they're all SUVs, bought outright. I'm not saying they're not entitled to official vehicles, but what we have abroad is that a minister only has 1 vehicle.
All right.
In Nigeria, we have for the minister himself and for his spouse. Say, the minister is at work, the wife has to go somewhere, so she has a driver attached to her. Now, Nigeria, we say we are broke. We have a local assembly plant manufacturing vehicles. The excuse is that local cars and SUVs are not that good enough to ply our roads. Why don't you get these? There's what we call I forgot.
So, Mr.
You
Adekunle,
design. Yes.
Mr. Adekunle, so do you agree that the juicy nature of governance is one of the key attractions to politics in Nigeria?
Of course it is. Now you said you asked one question. Let me just say something quickly. You see, politics, service, once you have it's here, it's not attractive. It's not attractive. Nobody goes into government to enrich himself because there's nothing to enrich yourself with. So you go there to serve. The minister or the secretary of state, we call them secretaries or MPs. We all live together in the same neighborhood. There's no difference. So they're one of us. That is why they're approachable. But in Nigeria, you have what we call the government reserved area for them. They don't live among the people. There's nothing like that. Nobody lives at the expense of the. I call it. I used to say something. We live in a society. Government officials live the life of an expatriate, and I tell you what that means. You see, when the colonial masters came to Nigeria, they were expatriates, and for an expatriate to be comfortable out of his domain, they make the life they're living more comfortable to attract them to come and work in a hostile environment. That is what an expatriate. That's what expatriate means. You're a foreigner living in a foreign country, and they have to make your life more comfortable for you than where you work, where you're coming from. So if your life is if you come into Nigeria now as an expatriate and you're not comfortable, you want to come. So you have to make your life comfortable. But then the system could absorb it because there are not many. But when they left, we continued living that lifestyle. The GRA was brought into the system by them. In UK, there's nothing like a GRA. In Germany, there's nothing like government reserved area. In America, there's nothing like a government reserved area. It is something they brought that we imbibed and we expanded on it.
All right.
Yeah. So can I continue, or you want
Kindly
me to
hold on,
interject here?
Mr. Adekunle, kindly hold on. Let me get the thoughts of Mr. Yedeji. So what can be done to reduce this juicy nature of governance in Nigeria?
Governance should be about service, really. People should not go into government, to politics and government just to make money, or to become lords of the manor. People are moving from the private sector now to the public sector because they find the public sector more conducive for wealth acquisition and accumulation. And if you can't make so much money in the private sector, you'll be able to get to the public sector, you become much, much richer than you've ever been. So there's a lot of money in the public sector, and there's income inequality in Nigeria because it's public sector driven, and there is free money dovetailing into different pockets from the public sector. So what can we do? We need to have reforms in different sectors of the economy. Number one, we need to make sure that we have the right size of the civil service to work with, right size the civil service, making sure that you don't have idle hands, you don't have excess capacity beyond what is determined, what is required to provide sufficient services for the public. That's one. And that's a controversial issue too, because when you talk about having the right size of the civil service, the labor movement become uncooperative. They believe it to be targeted at reducing the number of people that will work. Of course, some areas you need more people, some areas you need less people, so you need to find a balance here and there. So apart from that, there was a time Obasanjo came in and introduced monetization. Monetization was aimed at making the civil service slimmer and smarter, reducing the cost of overheads. He was able to dispose a lot of properties. Before then, 2004, for instance, was a federal government asset, property, estate, and every day they have to change those. They have to do bill of quantity, spend a lot of money, running into millions of dollars every year to maintain. So they came to a position that said, okay, let's sell off this thing and begin to monetize all the benefits of our people, of our workers. That means if you're entitled to housing, you have housing allowance built into your emolument. If you're entitled to a car, you have a transport allowance reflecting your car and your transportation needs. If you need a driver, everything is packaged into your emolument. So government doesn't need to buy for you a car of 60 million naira to move from point A to point B. Everything is already built into your salaries and wages. So that would have helped government to reduce cost of running government considerably. Unfortunately, President Yar'Adua came in and reversed that policy. Drivers that had been laid off were brought in. Then some people had even bought their houses, started getting another one. It's a major disaster and a major setback to the economy. What's the essence of monetization? If you're a professor, for instance, in a university, where you need to walk from your quarters to your office or drive a motorcycle or bicycle as may be convenient for you, there's no justification for you to have an SUV that will carry you from that point to from one point to the other within the university system. And it applies to every area of the civil service. So when you don't have a big car, your movement is 8 million per annum or 12 million per annum, you have a car of 60 million naira because of what you think your status has become within the system, we keep wasting money. And in the process, all the money for that particular area is wasted on the offices there, nothing left for services, nothing left for infrastructure. So we need to go downsize the right size, not necessarily downsize. Some areas you need more, some areas you need less. Right size the civil service, then monetize people's benefits. Right. No wastage should be tolerated on overheads and all that. Then we come to the public sector, to the political system. This is where we have the main gamut of, apart from the number of people that will not be needed, we focus too much on the federal government. You'll be surprised that even at the local government, you have PA to the chairman, then you have PA to the PA, then you have office of the wife of the chairman, then you have PA to madam, PA to this and that. The abuse is too much. No country survives on it. The other guest has been talking about the UK. In the city of Portsmouth, for instance, that's the only place you have, the only man that will be driven by a driver, chauffeur driven, probably be the mayor of that city. That government would engage to drive anybody. And when you see the modesty of his car, it looks like just any other person. When Boris Johnson became the prime minister in the UK, they told him to bring his furniture because his predecessor went away with the furniture on number 10. The furniture was she bought the furniture herself, and when she was leaving, she decided to take them. So the Prime Minister was asked to bring his own furniture. That's how tight the system is. So we need to look at our system, look at the American model, look at the UK model, look at the level of poverty, look at the level of the insufficiency of our infrastructure and look at the model that works. We don't need so many public servants, number one. We don't need so many public aids. We don't need so much money to maintain them. If you are going into government, be ready to sacrifice.
Right, so all of this you have mentioned, can we say, or are they the same as government's building capabilities, harnessing data, and reinvesting savings? Because some economists have said some of these cost-cutting programs fail to do better because we fail to do better until government does all of this.
Oh, yes. The political way to do these things are not there. That's the truth. If you become a governor today, the pressure on you becomes so much. You begin to plan for the next election. And in the process of planning for the next election, you discover you have to accommodate as many people as possible. Those are the people. There was a time a governor employed, I think, about 300 aides at a go. There was a governor that employed a special assistant from every ward in his state, believing that on election day, each of them would deliver their awards. And they are using public funds. It's a distraction to government. And these people are living large. And the more people begin to have that orientation that you go into government and you live, the more they lose confidence in hard work and industry. So the problem is multifaceted. But the most important thing is that government must have the will to work for the people, the greater number of the people. That is where we need to focus on. Begin to demand from government. See, we've run the system for too long. The presidential system has become too expensive. The gamut of the size of the public sector has grown, not by the size of services provided, not by the size of projects delivered, but by the number of people engaged to deliver less to the people.
All right. Mr. Adekule, the president has now ordered a reduction in the cost of travel for government officials to 60%. Is this enough?
I wouldn't say it's enough. Neither I would say it's not enough. But it's still it's the beginning. It's just the beginning. But I would still want. We're talking about the politicians. We lay more emphasis on the politicians, so to say. But it goes more beyond that. I just said something. I said, living government. I mean, should I say even the civil servants, government officials live the life of an expatriate, and we behave like an expatriate. The benefits, it's not just only the politicians that are benefiting and are milking the system dry. It's not just the politicians. It's everybody within the system. Now, let's talk about the civil service, recurrent expenditure, like my colleague said earlier on. Now, over every year, if you look at the budget, on recurrent expenditure is always high. Now, why don't we look at this recurrent expenditure? It's not just about salaries and benefits alone. There's in the procurement sector, every year, every budget, every cycle year, they keep on allocating funds for the same thing that they bought last year in terms of transport, stationaries, equipment, and all that. Why not? The modern thing now is to go into leasing. That costs. Government doesn't buy things purchase things outright. Nothing. They don't buy things outright purchase. They lease for 2, 3, 4 years. Like for computers now, because the lifespan of a computer, because it comes the new, like say maybe Windows or Microsoft and all that. That comes out every other 2, 3 years. It becomes obsolete after 3 years. So you lease it. So after 3 years, 2 years, you lease another one. You return that, you lease another one. It's a contract. Then you now have what we call a service level agreement to maintain it. We have that poor maintenance culture in Nigeria. We buy stuff 6 months down the line, it breaks down, we buy another one. We don't imbibe the maintenance culture. If we can imbibe that maintenance culture and having an agreement with the supplier to maintain this equipment over a period of time, since they are on lease, that saves costs. Another area where we waste, which people don't look into, If you go to any ministry, and I stand to be corrected, if you go to the office of, say, from directors above, because I'm sure of that, you have newspapers. And how many dailies do we have? We have over 5, 6. Let's say the major ones, or the major ones that people normally buy. They are like 5 or 6. The DG, the directors of all the ministries. Who pays for it? They don't. It comes from the coffers of the government. These are waste. We have to start cutting waste. You go to the office of any of these ministries. What do you find? Cable TVs. I can remember watching a on news some time ago. One of the honorables was saying that in his office, they didn't even put a cable TV. I said, what? Who pays for that? The taxpayer. These are where the money goes. Think little these things, right. It adds up. You go to minister's entertainment, tea, for Christ's sake. Nobody gives you tea here, even in cold. You want tea, you buy your tea. But the state gives us tea. I mean, the gas, so to say. And that's money. I remember in 79, I still remember what our Lord said when he was talking about free education and all that. I was going to ask him, where's the money going to come from? He said the first thing was going to cut if he became president was this waste in governance. And he mentioned this thing that I just said just now.
All right,
these two
Mr.
things.
Adekule. All right.
Yes.
All right. Quickly before we go on break, like I asked him, is the 60% slash, is this enough? And do you think the government officials who may have been affected by this directive will adhere?
Well, I think this week has been President Tinubu's best week in government because he's beginning to look at the core of the reforms that we need. And I think in the coming weeks, he'll be able to build on what he has started. He's beginning to look at how do we bring down the cost of governance. And he's looking at the privileges first. Why do you need to be at point A and for what? But we would need a lot more to go into it. We need a lot of reforms. Like I was saying earlier, we need to do right-size the civil service. We need to monetize people's emolument and stop wasting money on overheads that can be avoided. We need to outsource a lot of activities to the private sector by way of privatization and making sure that we take as much as possible from the public sector to the private sector, where we have higher level of efficiency and co. Then in addition to that, really, we would begin to look at a report like the Orosoye report, for instance. I will give you an instance. Why do we have TED fund planting projects all over high institutions in Nigeria? You have TED fund. What is TED fund? TED fund, as far as I'm concerned, is a contract awarding agency. Why do you need that? If you need the universities to do anything, let them determine their priorities. Let the money be disbursed to them directly from government. Why do you need an intermediary that will be the lot? Begin to award all kinds of contracts. And these people just plant all kinds of mushroom projects all over the places. Some of them are even below the architectural disasters. If you go to the state level, for instance, they have what we call SUPEB. SUPEB was an initiative to revamp primary and secondary education.
Absolutely.
But you see the kind of projects they are dumping on all these villages and towns, mushroom classrooms, older than classrooms built 70 years ago, looking older than them, obviously inferior to them in terms of architecture and quality of service of products used. You just discover that we have a big problem in Nigeria. We have to change that culture that government money must be spent anyhow. So government must begin to look at how to change that dimension, how to change that orientation. Then look at all these services, all these intermediary agencies and put them off your books. Why do you need their planting projects in institutions? What's their business with institutions? Institutions, you can donate. Of course, you can donate to them. You can, but when it's coming constantly from government, it's an aberration. You need to let these institutions determine their priorities, find a way to put the money into their account directly, and create a system by which you manage, you make sure that they don't divert the money. And the system is beginning to emerge with what we saw this week with the humanitarian stuff. EFCC is beginning to say, no, Let's look at your books. So you need that vibrant system, put those structures in place, let the governing council be made of people of knowledge and character, then disburse their money. Council PTDF. What's PTDF doing? What is NITDA doing? What's their involvement? Why do you have an agency supervising university, another agency supervising polytechnics?
All right.
Nigeria is too poor for the kind of structure we are running. We cannot develop with those structures. Look at those agencies one by one, eliminate some, merge some, then try to make the remaining ones slim and smart.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, let's take a break. I've been speaking with a UK